Disseminating and getting the narrative out. And we have two people here. Alice Linehan, who comes from Dallas, Texas, and Alice is first and foremost is a mom, and like so many of the people in the movement, that's her main job. But I don't know how she does this other job because she does that pretty full time. But she is recognized as an expert in aggregation and disseminating their narrative, and she's going to talk. Her and Anita are going to talk about that. Anita's best known probably as a 2008 Acorn whistleblower. She actually had a really interesting session this morning with her and Brandon Darby and then Andrew Breitbart this morning, and we're excited to have her. And she's going to talk a little bit about her experience coming from the left, and then her experience with when she came to the right in helping getting the information out in kind of tough emergency situations. So we'll start out, and Anita will tell you a little bit about her story, and she'll tell you some activities that we have. Alice will do the same thing, and then we'll spend the balance of the time having kind of an open dialogue about format, about what we talked about. So with that, I'm going to give the mic to Anita and get out of the way.
Good afternoon. Thank you, and thank you for coming. Now, how many of you are familiar with my story about working with Acorn? Well, great. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how the media played into this and what was going on in 2008 behind the scenes. I touched on that briefly when I've told this story before, but I'm just going to start in. Let that slide come up. Now, of course, everyone has heard about Acorn and the shenanigans that have come out of the organization, the massive voter registration fraud, registering Mickey Mouse, the starting lineup of the Dallas Cowboys, and a host of other people that have long been deceased. A lot of those allegations, if you can hit it again, the left will tell you that they're myths, and they have the media to back them up. One of the things that they do is they release these so-called scholarly reports, and they back it up with articles that are drowning out the narrative in a way that are controlling the narrative in a way that it only points towards the left. They say that the voter fraud is a myth and that it doesn't exist and it's disenfranchising black voters, or the GOP is racist and doesn't want certain people to vote. And they push these stories out over and over again in the mainstream media. That's how they've been controlling the narrative from the beginning. I track every single thing that comes in that says voter registration or voter fraud. I get a Google alert. And I will tell you, out of the probably 10 to 15 Google alerts that I will get in a day, most of them are leftist articles painting the GOP as racist for doing things like requiring a photo ID to vote. Can you believe that? An ID to vote is racist. But that's the narrative, and they control it. When you look at the articles that are put out there by the right, you'll have one article to 15 from the left, and they're using the mainstream media. These are just some of the headlines that are just from 2008. So that just gives you an idea how they were already controlling the narrative when I was working there. So this tells you what I was up against when I tried to expose them. I went to the New York Times with my story, as I've told you guys before. And the first thing that the New York Times did was go and start looking through the information I had given them. And instead of being excited because they could verify most of the documents and the people named and where they came from, instead, they decided that they wanted to cover up that story. And I tell this story to everyone, but I was really surprised because I worked with them from July of 2008 to October of 2008. The stories that were produced, if you go out there and you look at them, each one was more watered down than the next. And a lot of the things that I don't tell you in that short 20-minute talk that I can tell you now, and let me just go a little bit into the background with the New York Times and why they were not only carrying water for Acorn, but also Obama in 2008. How many of you have heard about the new building that the New York Times has down in New York? They have a brand new building, a nice facility. How many of you guys are aware that the New York Times was almost bankrupt in 2008? Now, what many people don't realize is that the Times only owns half of its building. The rest of the New York Times building is owned by a developer named Bruce Ratner. Bruce Ratner is most famous for bringing the New Jersey Nets to Brooklyn and taking away people's housing and homes and through eminent domain and working with Acorn to do it. In 2008, when the embezzlement scandal broke, Bruce Ratner gave Acorn a $1.5 million loan to keep them float above water. At the same time, the New York Times wanted to sell their half of the building. And to do that, they had to get the Ratners' approval. So do you really think that they were going to cover any stories related to Bruce Ratner's business partners or the $1.5 million loan or the partisan interest that they had not only in the election but in Acorn's survival? These are the behind-the-scenes stories that are going on with the media. So it's not just about carrying water for Obama. In this case, the New York Times' very survival was tied into making Acorn look like a great organization. So there, at the time, I didn't know this, but that was one of the reasons why that story never got reported. So what did I do? I went to CNN, their special investigative unit that they say that they go out there and they report on these stories, but they did a 3-tape interview that never aired. ABC News and Martha Raddatz had a story. They never got it out there. So how do we control the narrative? Next slide. So going into 2009, there was still a strong evidence of collusion between Acorn and Obama even after the election. No one on the left wanted to hear this story. And now that the election was over, they felt like it was old news. It was time to move on. And that's where Michelle Malkin stepped in. I had sent an email to her in October of 2008. And when I finally connected with her in 2009, she told me the story. She's like, I kicked myself every day for not getting that email because I could have really got that story out there. But she included it in her book, Culture of Corruption. If you look at chapter 8, there's a whole chapter there on Acorn and the connections between Obama and SEIU. That was the first, what I call mainstream coverage. And as you see, that book was a New York Times bestseller. And it included the story in there about them spiking the story about the Obama donor list, about the collusion with Acorn, about the FEC violations. From there, we were able to push it out through several blogs, Facebook, Twitter, my blog, emergingcorruption.com. All of these sites were pushing this story out to the point where it could not be ignored anymore, and we were able to once again get the attention of Fox News. In May of 2009, Bill O'Reilly declared war on the New York Times. Why did he do that? Because he got the voicemail that Stephanie Strom had left on my machine telling me that her editors had told her to stand down. O'Reilly was very smart. He didn't let Stephanie Strom know that he had the voicemail when he asked her for a statement. So she gave a statement denying she had ever said that. So the next day, O'Reilly goes and he plays the voicemail with Stephanie on there saying, hi, Anita, it's Stephanie, blah, 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 and my editors have told me to stand down. So then he declared war on the New York Times for lying and for going out there and trying to carry water for Obama. But as you know, in this 24-hour media cycle, sometimes things out of our control come up, and that's when the Tilden murder happened, and Bill O'Reilly was blamed for spurring people to go after abortion providers, and he kind of backed down from the New York Times in order to worry more about protecting himself. But I did get on a Megyn Kelly and other shows, and that's to let you know the power of the media, because right after I was on Megyn Kelly, guess what happened? I got sued for $5 million. So that's what happens when you push the story out there into the mainstream. They didn't know what to do, because before, when it was on Facebook and Twitter, no one really cared about it. It's just some story on Twitter, some conspiracy theory. But when Bill O'Reilly's covering it and Megyn Kelly's talking about it, all of a sudden it becomes a threat, and they felt a need to get lawyers involved and file a $5 million lawsuit. Just to let you know, we countersued them, and the day we were going to take discovery of their top Acorn people, they backed down and settled because they knew we would get them with perjury if they even tried to get up there on the stand and give a deposition. But this is how we pushed the narrative out there. We took a story that was untouchable, that no one wanted to talk about, that everyone in the mainstream media felt like after the elections was dead. We gave it new life and pushed it back out there in 2009 at a time when Acorn was really trying to get into the administration. And keep in mind, this is before the prostitution sting. This is before Breitbart and BigGovernment.com stepped in and made Acorn a household name. We kept pushing it out there to the people. So when Breitbart in September of 2009 released his Acorn prostitution videos and showed what a subversive organization they really were, people were primed to hear about it because they had steadily been hearing about Acorn over the course of say, 9 months. This is how you drive a story. When a story is that important, you don't let it die. You go through other means because they want to silence you. That's why the media ignores you. That's why they tell you you're crazy or a conspiracy theorist. But as you see, just from that story with big government, that launched biggovernment.com. And as you see, imagine what would have happened if we had had big government in 2008. We could have gotten a lot of stories out there, the stories that of people who weren't vetting Obama. But now, because of citizen journalists and investigative journalists, we're starting to see that we have a new playing field, and it's level now because we can get our stories out there. We can push them to people that are not listening, and we can make it a mainstream story. And that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. How to take your everyday, ordinary blog that you think no one but your mom reads and put it to a place where everyone is linking to it and connecting to it, and your stories are becoming national issues. Local stories become national issues. We did this with the King Street Patriots. How many of you guys have heard of True the Vote? Great. It's an initiative out of Harris County, Texas. And just to give you a little background, when I heard about this story, it was September of 2010. They were out there trying to do the unthinkable, putting poll watchers at the polls across Harris County, Texas, 1,000 poll watchers to be exact. They found over 23,000 fraudulent voter registration cards, and from a group called Houston Votes, who has ties to SCIU, America Votes, and George Soros and his people. So they had all this evidence. What did the Democrats do? They called them racist. They said it was 60s-style voter intimidation. They sued them. They shot at their meeting place. All of these things happened, and then you know what else happened? Harris County, Texas, which has 1/3 of the population of the entire state of Texas, their voting machines burned down in a mysterious fire right after True the Vote came forward and showed that there was massive voter registration fraud. Millions of dollars of voting equipment gone overnight. The people were talking about going to paper ballots, and everyone knows what type of fraud exists in paper ballots. So what did we do? My site, emergingcorruption.com, sent 2 reporters on the ground to Houston, Texas to cover the story. We paid for their expenses and put them down there because we needed people on the ground telling this story. They were reporting things that you didn't see in the Talking Points memo and the Daily Kos and MyDD, and they were reporting the truth. So eventually, after a week of these people being down there, they were able to shift the narrative. No longer were they able to lie with impunity because they had people down there that were watching them, that were saying this is not true, this is exactly what happens. And what we did was not only put it on emergingcorruption.com, we put it on Big Government. It got picked up by the Daily Caller because we had a partnership with these other news sites. If the story is big enough, no matter if it's local or whatever, we push it out as a national story. And to have these citizens down there fighting voter fraud in Houston, Texas, that was a story that needed to be national. Next thing you know, Catherine Engelbrecht is on Fox News, and she's got the Liberty Institute that's fighting for her because people started to realize that that fight in Houston was a national fight and we all had to get behind her. So that's how we can take your narrative, your corruption, whatever is going on in your area that doesn't sit right with you and you've been tracking it or investigating it, we can help you push that story out there and get these people and hold them accountable. We have more power than we realize because we are the new media. As we see from these conferences, they're desperately trying to look for some type of slip up, but we're the ones that seem to keep catching them. So I thank you guys for coming out here today, and Alice is going to tell you in detail how you can push the narrative out and control it.
This is Ginny Hankinson's going to talk. She's from libertylinked.com.
Well, this is just a housekeeping thing. If there's some things on your chairs for AFP, if you guys want to sign your name and email, they'd love to keep in contact with you. And I think we forgot to say that at the beginning, but I just wanted to make sure you guys knew about that. So thanks.
Thank you. I do better standing up. I get nervous and fidgety. Again, my name is Alice Linehan with Voices in Power. And actually, I'm going to let you do that. You want to do that? Okay, we are going to talk about how to flip the funnel. It's interesting, and we were at Andrew Breitbart's when he was talking this morning, and he was talking about how the Republicans haven't necessarily always stepped up and fought the battles that needed to be fought. It's up to us, we the people. But the situation is that in politics, it's all driven by money and power and controlling the narrative. And right now, we've got money, deep pockets, party candidates, agnostic consultants, people that are just trying, they need to make a living, so they're gonna do whatever they can to get someone elected. They're agnostic consultants, historical polls, statistics, platforms and endorsements, media advice, press conferences, special interests, and that all leads to where we are today. We've got a political establishment, and they too are controlling the narrative. What we're about is flipping the funnel and controlling the narrative from the bottom up, or from the ground up, through libertylinked.com. And everybody, if you've got a pencil, if you want to take some notes, I think that would be really great. But libertylinked.com is a technology platform that I am really excited about because it provides a blogging platform, which that's what I'm into, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it takes it down to the precinct level. The precinct level. And so what we need to do is get coverage. You know, the Republicans, when they get out the vote, it's about getting Republicans out to vote. Well, we're in times where we can't win by just getting Republicans out to vote.
What's the internet site?
LibertyLinked, LINKED.com, libertylinked.com. And so we want to get precinct coverage. We want neighborhood teams. Anita will talk in a little bit about Bolt Urban Alliances, driving the narrative. We need to activate the mainstream, use the get out the vote technology that Liberty Linked provides. There's voter management and election integrity. And then we elect civil servants because they are beholden to us, the people, because we control the narrative, and we control the grassroots get out the vote. That's our plan. How do we do that? You know, it's interesting. We've heard Anita's stories. We heard Brandon Darby talk earlier this morning at a breakfast. We heard about just how bad the left is, how far. Anita reminds me, John Funn says, when a Republican loses, they go back into the private sector. When a Democrat loses, they don't eat. These people they're in survival mode. They're truly in survival mode. And so when one president in America is elected, he has the power to appoint 5,000 people to run a bureaucracy of 2 million non-military, non-postal, 10 million outside outsourced contractors, and they control 13 trillion per term in expenditures. Folks, it's about power. It's all about power. Those numbers are larger than the GDP of all but 4 countries on the face of the earth. We are in times that if we don't step up and take control, we're going to lose our country. This is really serious. And we have people like Anita and Brandon Darby who have, you know, through threat of their lives and their families' lives, they've stepped up. And now I'm asking you to step up. I'm only here today because I started this 2 years ago. I'm not any different than any of you. It's really funny because when I first met Anita Moncrief, I started a company in Texas called Resolute Media Group. We were covering local politics, and we sent in to get a press pass for the Southern Republican Conference in New Orleans. I had a media pass. I went in as the media. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I had a media pass. And I ended up interviewing Anita Moncrief the day after they dropped the $5 million lawsuit on her. I interviewed Herman Cain that day. I interviewed Ted Cruz. I was you. I just sent in and got a press pass. I became the press. I became the press, and you can too. Next. You know, when I talk about the left, I like to use the analogy that they're kind of like drug dealers. You have the liberal media and the politicians creating the propaganda. They take it down to the acorn-type organizations and find the pushers, and then the pushers take it into our communities, and they indoctrinate our children and our grandchildren. They are great at reaching the passive majority. And we have got to take that on in a big way. And here's what I propose. There are people like myself who stepped up, became the media, and I'm going to give you a few strategies in a little while to do that. But I became someone who's known as a connected authority. I aggregate news and information on my Facebook, on Twitter, on libertylinked.com daily, morning, noon, and night. There's some Texas people here, I know, back there. Wave your hand. I met them last night at the debate. They follow me on Facebook, and they follow what I'm covering in Texas in a big way. And so we have the power to become the media. I went to my 25th high school reunion, and everybody knew what I did. And they come to my Facebook and Twitter daily for their news and information. I am a connected authority person. Then there is the engaged minority. That's you. Those are the people that show up at tea parties. Those are the people that come to write online. Those are the people that are showing up at the local meetings every week or every month. That's you. But there's this passive majority that still is watching Dancing with the Stars, and they don't get it, and they believe the propaganda from CNN and the New York Times. But how have they reached those people? It's through mass media. But that's also through those acorn-like communities, hands-on in the community. So we have to step up, because while Acorn is indoctrinating our children through the pushers, we're at work. We're told we can't talk about politics. We're left out of the conversation. So let's get back into the conversation. Next. What I propose and what libertylinked.com proposes is that how many people here are leaders of a Tea Party or a grassroots organization or a Republican organization for that matter? Good, there's quite a few. What you need to do is take control of the narrative and create a communications team within your organization. And that team is responsible. First, you need a team leader, and identify some people within your membership who can be editors, who can be photographers, who can go to the local town hall meetings and videotape and create that content at the local level. And that communications team becomes the communication expert. Those people become the experts in your local area. And then the membership of your organization knows that there's someone controlling the narrative, or there's a committee of people who are controlling the narrative for your organization. Next. You know, it's interesting, when Anita was talking about the King Street Patriots, after I had the opportunity to interview her, I actually was there on the ground the day, on election day at King Street Patriots, and we were wandering the streets taking on the Black Panthers and trying to get that story correct. And what happens is you've got an event that happens, and you create that content. And then your local Tea Party has a communications team that takes that content and they push it down to the membership, and then they disseminate it out through the membership. You know, I like to say, the power of compounding activists. I have several Facebook walls. I have like 5,000 people on one. You don't need thousands and thousands of people on yours. You just need 100 or 200 of people that know you and trust you. Because when content comes out of your communications team or you, they know you, they trust you, you become the expert, and they're going to take that information and pass it on to their friends. So you don't need large numbers, you just need your membership aggregating news and information. Go ahead.
Question. Are your slides on your website or?
Chad, what do we do?
They're not. These are a variety of slides put together for a variety of them. But if you reach out to Alice, we'll be happy to forward you pieces. So.
Yeah, well, and if
You can go to Liberty Link, and both their groups are on there. You can reach out to them there, or it's Alice at voiceofpower.com,
Yeah.
or Anita at Bolt. Boots of Liberty.
Yeah.
Bootsofliberty.com.
if you will write voicesempower.com, and you can also go there in the portfolio page and get ideas and information. But this communications team, there are things that happen in your local area. King Street Patriots was happening in Texas. We had how many people know Sheila Jackson Lee in Texas? Know of her? She's a radical leftist. And, she was in a hearing, she was speaking and she was talking about Christian militants being more dangerous than Muslim terrorists. And we took that issue on. We had a press conference. We brought Anita in, and we had a press conference on the ground in Harris County, had black pastors come, and we did an online press conference. We had Alfonso Z. We were creating this content. Now, Sheila Jackson Lee didn't pay attention to us. Why should she? We've never been a threat to her. The liberal media isn't going to cover us. But what we did is we created content. There's video of this press release. So when Boots of Liberty, when Anita's group goes into the urban areas, into the black community, and they're being fed all that propaganda from Sheila Jackson Lee and the liberal media, we can counter that. And what if a conservative Democrat runs against Sheila Jackson Lee? The Republicans aren't going to take on that race. They're not going to put money in that race. Sheila Jackson Lee is a real threat to us in Texas. The voter fraud around her elections is awful. So we've created content that Anita can use going into the community, that a communications team around the Tea Parties in that community can push out, and that conservative Democrat can use that content as well. So it's about a communications team in your local area creating content, and then you've got your membership that knows to go to your website or go to different people in that communications team and find out what they're aggregating daily, and they aggregate it to their 100 people. And it's the power of compounding activists. We can go around the liberal media in our own communities. Next. In Texas, we had an issue with our Speaker of the House, Joe Straus. The majority of Texans, Tea Party people, had voiced their concern for Joe Straus being elected. On a Friday, I sent out an email. I called on Tea Party leaders to show up at a taping. On Monday, we taped a video, we edited, and we were calling on our state representatives not to vote for Joe Straus for Speaker of the House. And if you go on voicesempower.com, you can see the video that we produced. We produced that. It wasn't some big media company. It was the grassroots people getting our voice out there. And through aggregating and disseminating that video, Joe Straus originally, after the 81st legislative session, had over 120 pledges for him 2 years in advance for Speaker of the House. At the end of this latest legislative session, he had about 36. So there's a very good chance that Joe Straus will not be the Speaker of the House of Texas. We did that. We drove the narrative. We created that content.